All right, guys. So the economic war is getting from bad to worse. And if you think Trump's tariffs on Canada and Mexico were bad, the worst is yet to come. The U.S. economy is determined to punish the world, and they are going after the global majority now. This is so insane. It's so risky that we are truly heading towards the economic apocalypse at warp speed. Now, Trump has confirmed that if BRICS dares to step out of line and replace the U.S. dollar, huge tariffs are coming for the bloc. He could slap a 100% tariff on the BRICS nations importing into the U.S. market. And just like his other threats, we have to take this very seriously. Trump understands the true might of the United States isn't really the military. It sure isn't technology or AI. American hegemony revolves around the U.S. dollar system, and if that system breaks, a lot of painful things will happen. It will literally break the U.S. bond market and cause an inflation crisis that will make 2022 a walk in the park. Now Trump's post tells us a lot, especially when he calls BRICS hostile countries. They will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty U.S. dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs. There's no chance that BRICS will replace the U.S. dollar in international trade, and that's really the big fear here. If countries start digging the USD when they buy and sell stuff, it's game over for the unipolar world order. Firstly, we must understand that there's no BRICS currency today. It doesn't exist. Now, I've no idea who's providing Trump with his reports, but this is false. And there are two parts we have to focus on here because it reveals the game plan of how Trump could tariff BRICS. The U.S. wants BRICS to give a commitment not to ditch the dollar in global trade. Now, how is that going to play out? Monitor banking transactions and SWIFT to ensure all payments are made in the reserve currency. That's going to be quite impossible. The next demand is even more insidious. Trump wants BRICS countries not to back any other currency in global trade. And amongst all the BRICS currencies, which is the strongest, which is the most popular, is the Chinese RMB. So if you sit back and think about it, in a roundabout way, Trump is pushing the China containment policy once again, basically using BRICS itself to try and contain the Chinese economy. For over a decade, China has been aggressively de-dollarizing their trade. They went from less than 1% in RMB transactions to nearly 53% at the start of 2024, and today is probably well over 60%. Now that is why Trump wants to contain China's economy. The more China trades with the world, the more chances are the dollar will get pushed to the sidelines. Now, of all the regions in the world, which major economies will grow the most will grow the fastest? Now we know for one that Europe is getting decimated, and let's not forget Canada is also being hammered by U.S. tariffs. So G7 economies will either grow at a snail's pace or they will simply stagnate. The G7 comes in at only 30%. Even if you combine the U.S. and the EU together, their economic strength loses to the BRICS. There's a reason why countries like Indonesia have joined. You want to sell to an economic bloc that's growing and not contracting. You skate to where the puck is going to be, and it's not at the Western markets anymore. Let's have a look at the GDP growth forecast for the G7 versus BRICS. All Western economies are below the world average of 3.2%. Despite their endless deficit spending, even U.S. GDP growth couldn't cut it. But the economic growth in BRICS, the majority are above the world average. China's growth alone has been confirmed at 5%. So the numbers are rather conservative. This poses a big problem for the U.S. dollar system. There's a reason why China isn't afraid of Trump's tariffs, and that's because they are selling into markets like Brazil, which is part of BRICS. Now, as the Chinese economy grows, they will export more and more, and they'll import more for consumption as well. And do you think China will be using their local currency, the RMB, or use the U.S. dollar? And the answer should be deadly obvious. In just the first 9 months of 2024, China's trade with BRICS hit nearly $650 billion worth. And this is a year-on-year increase of 5.1%. This is very important. Because the majority of this trade is done in local currencies, it doesn't even need to be the RMB. As long as transactions that settle outside of the USD, it still counts as de-dollarizing, and this is why Trump is losing his mind. This is why the main goal of his administration is to contain China's growth. Beijing's trade with the world is the biggest driver of de-dollarization, and when countries stop using dollars in trade, the US loses the ability to punish them. Suddenly, the talk of sanctions becomes less and less threatening. Now, the dollar system is all about keeping the hegemon alive and controlling the world with a tight leash.
Look, I think the bottom line is we're in a conflict. And I think we have to start talking about it that way. A lot of time, most of the people who are up here now don't remember. I was very young, obviously, at the end of the Cold War, but it's been about 30 years since there was another superpower on the earth that was in conflict with the United States. And we are back in that place. And we need to stop pretending like that's not the case. Now, I hope it's never an armed conflict, but it's a conflict at every level you can imagine. Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't.
Rubio is 100% right here. If de-dollarization continues, the US will lose the ability to sanction the world. But let's talk about the economic emergency that revolves around the dollar. Now, there's a practical reason, a practical need, why Trump wants the world to use dollars in trade. It's because he needs countries to constantly buy US bonds. Never before in history have US bond yields flown up after a rate cut. The 10-year yield that controls every other bond cost in the United States is hitting higher. That's even after the Federal Reserve cut down interest rates. When yields go up, it means demand for the bonds is crashing. Countries around the world, well, they're sick and tired of U.S. deficit spending that's being wasted on stupid adventures. And this is very problematic for Trump. He has pledged to reshore manufacturing and to bring countries and companies into the United States. Tariffs are not nearly enough. He will have to borrow a ton of money to even try it. Now, during Rubio's confirmation, he has confirmed that the U.S. bringing manufacturing back is an existential crisis. The fear of China in Washington has truly reached epic proportions. Now, if BRICS keeps abandoning the dollar, how can the U.S. borrow money at cheap rates? Trillions will have to be borrowed. Trump has promised a ton of tax cuts as well. Now he told companies around the world that the tax rate will be cut from 21% down to 13%. And it sounds great on paper, but the U.S. government still spends a lot of money on defense and entitlements. And where is this shortfall going to come from? Simple. From deficit spending. Money borrowed from the world has to be paid back. In 2024, U.S. GDP grew by 2.8%, and that sounds decent until you realize the truth. To drive this growth, the government had to borrow and spend 6.7% of GDP. So in other words, for every dollar borrowed, the U.S. generated less than 50 cents of growth. It's a big reason why bond yields are starting to climb, even though the Federal Reserve has slashed interest rates multiple times. And this puts the U.S. economy in a very dangerous position. Trump needs the world to use dollars and buy bonds to keep all the yields down, or his reshoring plans will end up as a big dud. But if there's one signal of de-dollarization, it's the gold price. Now we have said many times that countries are moving away from dollar assets. Gold has smashed past $2,800. This is a new historic high. Trump's tariffs are reigniting this record rally, and it won't be long until we see gold hit $3,000. It might even happen this year. BRICS is done with U.S. assets. In fact, the whole world is probably done at this point. Trump's tariffs on his closest allies just told BRICS all they need to know about the U.S. If Trump is able to punish his closest allies and trading partners next to him, BRICS is not safe. It's not impossible that the U.S. sanctions them or even confiscates their assets tomorrow. And that's just based on the counterparty risk, guys. Trump's tariffs on Canada are also going to raise domestic energy prices in the U.S. There will be a 10% import tax on Canadian crude coming into the country. Unlike Trump, we know what tariffs means. U.S. consumers, you will be paying more at the pump. So now, inflation is going to get worse. And if you're living in America, I'm sad to say that your cost of living is heading up in record time. Trump has really done it this time. He's giving global economies around the world the ultimate incentive, the ultimate excuse to dump U.S. assets for gold. It makes no sense to hold U.S. bonds, especially for BRICS nations. Because of the tariffs, the dollar is about to get stronger, and global currencies will fall. The Mexican peso and Canadian dollar has crashed by over 1% again within a matter of minutes. Another currency crisis is coming for the world, courtesy of Donald Trump. And if you're BRICS, you'll want to push for 100% trade in bilateral currencies. You don't want to dump your own currencies to buy dollars and impoverish your own people. Global central banks and governments now have to decide. If I buy assets like U.S. Treasury bonds, it's a double negative. My holdings can always get confiscated like Russia. Now, buying U.S. debt also means funding Washington. I'll be funding the containment of my own economy. There's no differentiation between allies and enemies today. It's all fair game. And it's not a surprise that China is back buying more gold bullion. Since December, Chinese holdings have increased again to over 73.2 million ounces. This is despite record gold prices. China understands something that most Western countries don't, that the U.S. can indeed take away your bonds. And even if they don't, U.S. deficit spending is not going to stop. Trump will spend money like no tomorrow in this trade war. And this could be the year where BRICS decides to dump U.S. assets in a big way. And if you think things can't escalate any further, it's really time to wake up and smell the coffee. Trump has made it crystal clear that the tariffs aren't over yet. He can still ramp up the pain on the global economy. This could be the final frontier. Trump and Besson could raise the overall tariff rate of the U.S. to 25%, and they have talked about it multiple times now. We could end the year with a 60% tariff on China and 20% on the rest of the world. And this is going to make the currency crisis doubly worse. Whether you are in the U.S. or not, inflation for you is going to rise. And that's what happens in a tariff war. Prepare for higher prices. Now, will Trump punish BRICS with a 100% tariff? And let's not put our heads under the sand. This is just another season of The Apprentice for him. It could very well happen. And if it does, we'll see de-dollarization reach a new level. However, unlike all other plans, it's going to backfire. Ultimately, the dollar and the U.S. economy will be the true victims here. But let me know what you think. Will Trump punish BRICS for de-dollarizing? And how badly will this backfire? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.